Thank you so much, China. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today, celebrating resilience of small business in Denver. And I have to say, I'm just so inspired by Giovanna's work and her recognition today by the Daniels Ethics Fund Initiative. You know, that is real leadership when you're able to take values and really put them into practice, have them show up in your work. It's the kind of character and integrity that we need more of in this world. I really want to begin today by taking a moment to just reflect on this extraordinary moment that we're living in. It's the kind of moment that in the future we will tell our children about. Slowdowns, shutdowns, social upheaval. You know, think of the craziness that we are living in. Schools that lie dormant while parents are sitting at home with their children, trying to telecommute while their children are learning, you know, maybe at the breakfast table with them. We've seen, you know, our commercial sector disrupted, our travel industry disrupted. We have, you know, a lot of strange things. We have vacant theaters and restaurants, and meanwhile, you know, online delivery, food delivery businesses thriving. Our hotels and airports are quiet, but our online meetings are relentless. And, you know, it's a time of tremendous social upheaval, too. You know, we think about the fact that we are in the middle of a pandemic. People are obviously concerned about being around crowds, and yet we can turn on the TV at any moment and see the political unrest and social protests that brings people out into the community near one another because they are so impassioned about this moment. And all of this taking place against the backdrop of a presidential election that surely will make a huge impact on the future of our country. I know if you're like me, many of you, I'm sure, have been watching the news and talking to your relatives and loved ones, and you have to say, what is going to happen? You know, these are strange times. And, you know, it's worth reflecting that not all times in our lives are like this. We have times that are peaceful. We have times of relative success. We have times of stability. And, you know, one of the things that I've been reflecting on is that when things are quiet and going well for us, it's very easy to kind of check out. It's very easy to go to sleep, stop noticing what's happening in the world around us. And this is no such time. We have a glass of cold water thrown in our faces. We are awake. We are conscious. I'd like to suggest to you that that is a pretty interesting gift that we are experiencing right now. And the gift is that this moment is calling us to be more fully conscious in our lives. I want to suggest to you that this time of transition and change and disruption, it could be a time for enormous personal growth. It could be a time to become stronger and better in ways that will last a long time and benefit us over the course of our lives. I've been doing work with leaders for almost 20 years now, and over the last several years, I've been working on some in an area that I really enjoy. I call it inward sun work, and it's based on a book that I wrote called The Inward Sun. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about the inward sun. What's the inward sun? And the way I describe it to people is I say, well, you know, we all know about the sun in our sky. I know out there in Denver, you got a big, beautiful sun that's shining in the sky a lot of the times over the mountains. And you know how that sun makes you feel. Puts a smile on your face, makes you feel positive and engaged and energetic about the work that you have to do. And I think of the inward sun as the reality that all that energy that's out there in the universe, ultimately, it has to come back and touch us as individuals. We all need that inward sun going on inside of us, that light within. That's a place where we draw resources, reserves. And what I'd like to think with you about today is, how do we tend to that inner fire? How do we stoke that inner fire so that we have the energy to really be resilient and to thrive in times that are very, very challenging? I want to say a word about business. I am an entrepreneur. I have worked on businesses, and I have worked with a lot of business leaders over the years. And I think a lot of people who are not in business don't understand how creative business is. When you're outside business, when maybe you're not directly engaged in entrepreneurship, you think of business as just, making money. But what we know is that the activity of making a profit involves enormous creativity. It involves enormous resilience. It involves enormous dedication. And it can be such a meaningful activity. And, the way to place this conversation that we're having today in the strongest possible terms, I'd like to put it like this. This work that we do, the work that gets us up in the morning, how we go about building our businesses so that we can earn a living, make a profit, and serve our clients that we care about deeply. What is the biggest challenge that we face? What is that which interferes with our ability to do that? What is the challenge that shuts down and dampens our inward sun so that maybe when we get up in the morning, we don't feel so resilient, we don't feel so energetic? And if you're a human being, you've been there. Some mornings you've gotten up and you said, wow, today I'm not feeling it because of some challenge that you have faced in the course of your work. I'd like to suggest to you that the biggest challenge we face, as entrepreneurs, as human beings, as leaders, is fragility. It's our own fragility. And not just our own fragility, but the fragility that's out there in the world, the fragility of the people, systems, organizations, and community around us. Now, what do I mean by fragility? What do I mean by being fragile? Something that's fragile falls apart easily. It shatters under stress. Think of it this way. What's the difference between a rubber ball and a delicate piece of crystal? I can take a rubber ball and I can throw it against the wall and it's going to be fine. It's going to bounce. I'm going to catch it and it's going to look exactly the same. But if I throw a delicate piece of crystal against the wall, you know what's going to happen. It's going to shatter into 1,000 pieces and it will never be able to be reconstructed. So this thing about fragility, this is something serious that we face. Noticing and tending to the fragility in our world is something really important. How do we know when things are being fragile? Well, we see fragility all around us, because we see what's happening in this pandemic. But we can call out a few elements of fragility. Resistance to change, that's something that is fragile. When things get isolated from resources, they become fragile. When things become very, very complex, they become more fragile. When things are rigidly dependent upon each other, they become fragile. Think of these things. Just want you to imagine. Imagine a house of cards. Imagine a building with a foundation that has termites, that's rotting. Imagine a person with a depressed immune system. Imagine a company with too much debt. Imagine a team that's built around just one performing star where the rest of the team is weak. In a different space, I know, in the West and even out in Colorado, we've seen fires. Imagine that forest, parched, dry as bones, vulnerable to a spark, right? Imagine communities divided by hatred and prejudice. These are all things that are fragile. Quick story I want to tell to illustrate. We could call it the tale of two small businesses. I'm sure, like many of you, one of my practices is to go to the gym every day. And at the beginning of the pandemic, the gym that I go to, which is, to me like a church, every day I would go there, my regular routine, it closed. And I knew that something strange was going on because I didn't hear anything. The gym didn't communicate with any of its customers and clients. I called around to some friends who had been going to the gym. We couldn't get hold of anybody that was involved in the staff or the leadership. And sorry to say, a few months later, I read in the newspaper that my gym had gone bankrupt. Now, my wife also belongs to a gym, and she had a radically different experience with her gym. What happened was, amazing to tell, shortly after the pandemic, her gym contacted her and other clients, and they asked their customers if they would continue to pay their monthly fees while they were re-engineering their programming. The gym then went into a process of developing online services for its clients. And something really unusual happened. My wife, who was a person that would maybe get to the gym once or twice a week, she started going to her gym online every morning. So actually what was happening, the pandemic was strengthening its relationship with its clients. And so later on, here we are, months into the pandemic, my gym has disappeared, but my wife's gym is thriving. We could tell this story about so many different enterprises. The tale of one entity that is, crushed, steamrolled, dissolves, it's fragile, it breaks under stress, versus another entity that is somehow able to get it together, somehow able to be resilient, come back, grow, learn in a crisis. And this is why fragility and thinking about fragility is so important. In our inward sun work, we really look at two fundamental steps that we can take to move ourselves away from being fragile. The first step, I like to think about it as the movement from being fragile to being robust. Think again about that rubber ball. Rubber bends, it gives under stress. When it receives a shock, it gives, but then it bounces back. And the give, the flexibility, is what is the very quality that allows it to bounce back. And so one question I want you to take home with yourself tonight is ask yourself, how do we develop the ability to absorb a shock and then rebound? One of the things that we have to pay attention to is the habits that erode our flexibility, our give, and our restorative energies. And I want to mention these. These are really fundamentals. We think of them as basics, but they are so important, okay? Think of this: sleep, nutrition, exercise. This one, very important, tending to the core relationships around us, our family, our friends, our colleagues. Avoiding substance abuse, substance dependency, right? And then also our spiritual development, really hidden an important variable in how we respond to stress. Tending to these basic needs, these basic factors of resilience can build a strong foundation. It can be almost like the way an athlete builds a core, and that allows us to come back. It sets the ground for our resilience. Unfortunately, we live in a world in which oftentimes these basics are the first things that get thrown out in a crisis. It's like we're in a storm, and the first thing we did was throw our life preservers overboard. But there's something even more important than those basics, and I think of this as a step two. The step two in our inward sun work is from being robust to being anti-fragile, okay? Anti-fragile, anti-fragility. Now, maybe you've heard of that. There's a wonderful book where some of this work is inspired from. It's by Nassim Taleb. The title is Anti-Fragility, Things That Gain from Disorder. What does it mean to be anti-fragile? So I'm going to give you a very simple way to think about it. Maybe you can, again, take this home if you haven't thought of anti-fragility before. If I send you a vase in the mail, you'd be very concerned. A delicate vase, if I didn't wrap it in bubble wrap, if I didn't put styrofoam around it. Okay, that's fragile, right? If I send you a basketball, you're not going to care. You're going to say, just throw it in the box. It's going to be fine. It can take a beating, and it's still going to work when I get it. That's robust. But if I was sending you something anti-fragile, and this is interesting, you would actually hope that someone would try to damage it. Because when you received it, you would know that if it got damaged, it would actually be stronger. Anti-fragile things are things that improve when we try to hurt them. Very strange category, very counterintuitive. But we do know that there are quite a few systems in our life that are anti-fragile, and I'm going to give you a few to think about. One, of course, is your immune system. Your immune system is anti-fragile. When you get sick, it's not fun. It's very debilitating. But what happens is your body is getting stronger. The immune system is at work. We know this. We have so much talk about vaccines. We know that if you got COVID, you're actually stronger. If you survived it, you're actually stronger afterwards. Now you're immune from COVID. And this is a reality. You know, when we have children, we want them to get sick. A child that's never exposed to illness is much weaker in a more fragile condition than one that suffers with some illnesses. It's actually good for you as a child to have some illnesses because it builds your immune system. The same thing is true of our muscles and bones. Our muscles and bones love stress. If we didn't stress out our muscles and bones, they would get sick and they would become fragile, right? We know that exercise makes us stronger. That is being anti-fragile. So anti-fragility, what are anti-fragile systems? They're intentional, without being rigid. They respond to challenges with openness to new objectives. Think of my wife's gym, the way it worked on developing new relationships with customers. Anti-fragile systems are experimental and innovative. They take bets. They try to see what works and then they work toward that. Not locked in one pattern. Again, think of the way my wife's gym really responded to stress. What we're seeing with anti-fragility is the ability of a system to evolve. It doesn't just react. It's intelligent. It learns. It grows. And it builds new paradigms and processes to deal with the evolving demands that it faces. Okay, well, all this sounds good, but we need to leave you with some practical advice and steps. How are we going to become anti-fragile? And here's where I think we've done some really great work in our Inward Sun effort, and that is to identify 7 specific skills, specific activities that you can work on that make you anti-fragile, help you to become anti-fragile. And these are, the way I want you to think about this is not that these are ideas. They are not just ideas. These are things you practice. If you understand them, but you don't practice them, you don't get any benefit out of it. So what are the 7 practices that I would want you to work upon to become more anti-fragile? Okay, the first one is mindfulness. Now, I know you're thinking to yourself, oh, mindfulness, I've heard that 1,000 times. But I want you to really take mindfulness seriously. Anti-fragility requires deep awareness. And guess what? Our natural state is not to be deeply aware. Our natural state is to be with greatly fractured attention and sometimes blind to what's going on in the world. Mindfulness requires enormous disciplined practice in order to become better at it. The second one is compassion. What do I mean by compassion? Compassion, your ability to form loving, supportive relationships with those around you. I thought it was remarkable the way Giovanna talked about the power of her team. You could tell that they have compassionate engagements with one another. In my wife's gym, one of the key assets that they built was they had compassionate relationships with their customers. Their customers knew how much they cared about them, right? And they then returned that compassion to the company, and that made it resilient, gave it the ability to thrive and grow. Compassion is a critical element of anti-fragility, building compassion. When we're mindful and compassionate, we're more engaged with the world around us. We're more aware of what's going on internally, externally, and with those people around us, right? Now we have 3 more practices. These practices relate to aspiration. And anybody that is an entrepreneur knows what it means to aspire, right? You know that that aspiration, setting goals, is key to success in business. If you didn't drive yourself to try to do what you couldn't do, you wouldn't even be in business, right? You have to set high goals. These are skills that help you in goal setting and achievement. So the first one is visioning. In visioning, of course, you've heard of people having a vision, but we're talking about a disciplined approach to visioning. That means painstakingly writing down and expressing in words and images those ways that you want to change the world, those things that you want to create in the world. Visioning is a key skill for anti-fragility. Your vision is what gets you off the mat when you're knocked down, right? Your vision, your aspiration is what gets you up when you've had a setback. Willpower, second skill in this domain, willpower. And what I mean by willpower is your ability to focus sustained energy on the things that you set out to do. We all know what it's like. We've all seen people in our lives who set goals, who have dreams but never take any steps towards those goals or dreams. And that's because they don't have sufficient willpower. Willpower is something you can develop. You can get stronger at willpower. The third one is resilience. Resilience. And what I mean by resilience is your ability to learn from setbacks and failures. When you don't have the skill, the practice of being resilient, you respond to setbacks with maybe depression or by giving up. When you have resilience, you respond to setbacks and failures with learning, and this is key element of being anti-fragile. So I've already done 5 now. There's 2 more. Bear with me. 2 more. The last 2 are about collaborative creativity. They're really focused on the idea that every great enterprise, every noble undertaking requires enormous teamwork. And if you're in business, you know that. You know that without effective teamwork, you really can't accomplish anything. And teamwork involves these 2 skills. One of them we call dynamics, which is about systems thinking. It's about looking at all the complexity in your environment and being able to manage complexity, the fact that we're in a world that is constantly changing, and the changes in the world, they're not only neutral to our ambitions, they're sometimes hostile to our ambitions. Think about the way my gym utterly failed to manage the complexity of the pandemic. They were just wiped out. They couldn't manage those changes, and now they don't exist anymore. So dynamics, systems thinking, this is a key skill. And then the last one is something that we call genership. Genership, if you're interested in it, I wrote a book about it. Genership is the idea of combining leadership, collaboration, and creativity. And what I really would contend to you is that this activity of creating with others collaboratively is somewhat different than leadership. It is, I believe, at the heart of successful business, dynamics and genership, these 2 activities. When you build a strong team of players that work together to win some kind of championship, you're practicing these skills around creative collaboration. If you were to take a team of artists and engineers and collaborate on a design, you're working with these skills, systems dynamics and shared creativity. So here is your anti-fragile toolkit, right? The things that you can do to become more anti-fragile. Mindfulness, compassion, vision, willpower, resilience, dynamics, and genership. The ability to be anti-fragile, to grow stronger in a crisis, is very rare. And the reason that it's so rare is that mastery of these practices is very rare. And I want you to think of this as a set of practices that you can practice, like stretches or lunges or sprints or gymnastics. And what we're doing in our Inward Sun developmental work is really, it's like creating a gym and a playing field for you to work together to get stronger at these abilities. When we practice together, we can grow the internal flame of our Inward Sun. We can liberate our power to prosper, to create value, meaning, and create beauty in the world around us. And we'd love to be of service to you. You can find us through the Chamber if you're interested in pursuing any of this more. It's been such a pleasure to be with you. I feel confident about the future of Denver small business. Thank you.